Hi, this is David with EV World News, and this is the weekly update. Today, our first story is going to talk a little bit about Toyota's chairman predicts that battery electric vehicles will never reach more than about 30% of all cars on the road. Now, Toyota's been working on a lot of other things. They've been trying to make gas engines more efficient. They're big in hybrids. And you've got to admit, they're definitely one of the biggest out there when it comes to hybrids. They probably have more vehicles in that space, but they have been notably behind a lot of other manufacturers in terms of putting out electric vehicles. Chairman Akio Toyoda believes battery electric vehicles will reach at most 30% market share, with the rest taken up by hybrids, hydrogen fuel cell, and fuel-burning cars. With 1 billion people in the world living without electricity, it's hard kind of to fathom that everybody could be driving electric cars when 1 out of every 8 people in the world really doesn't even have access to electricity, period. But when it comes to those, a lot of those don't have access to cars either. So a little bit of this can be true. The number one car makers tried to push back against criticism of falling behind in the transition to electrified vehicles, saying that it's pioneering in hybrid drivetrains, hydrogen technology, and a holistic approach to ultimately prove to be the right approach for the business, customers, and environment. One thing is, they make all these gas motors in Japan, and they're always concerned about making sure that their employees still have jobs and what's good for the Japanese economy. So, a prediction by Bloomberg is that by 2040, EVs will account for about 75% worldwide of new car sales and 44% of cars on the road. So even if everybody switched to EVs today, it would take 25 years or more for everybody to still not be driving gas-powered cars, because there'd still be lots of cars out there. If you look even at like Cuba, where there's all these embargoes, they're still driving cars from the 1950s that they've replaced engines. You still see the same cars driving around. So you wouldn't see all the gas cars go away anytime soon. Elon Musk, he disagrees with this. Musk is actually quite realistic about all of this. He knows that we are not going to switch to everything being an electric vehicle anytime soon. There's a rush to change. And, for instance, in the United Kingdom, everything's going to either plug-in hybrid or full battery electric in 2030. And in 2035, they're even getting rid of the plug-in hybrids. As far as new car sales go, I mean, you can still have used cars selling, but they're trying really hard with legislation to push the agenda. In a lot of other countries, tax incentives have been a big piece of getting people to adopt EVs. And in Nordic countries like Iceland and Norway and Finland, Denmark, Sweden, they have these high value-added taxes, or VATs, and the government is basically not charging those taxes on electric vehicle purchases, which is probably a bigger savings than even the $7,500 tax credit here in the United States. So it's led to 80% EVs adoption rate, which has been quite staggering in comparison to the rest of the world. Musk says, eventually we'll look back on the combustion engine cars with the same quaint disregard that we currently possess for steam engines. Obviously, it's a lot like when gas cars replaced horses at the start of the 1900s. And our next topic is the United States Postal Service rolls out first charging stations for a fleet of Ford e-Transits and other EVs. So, Postal Service is committed to 9,250 Ford Transit EVs through the end of 2024. The vans are initially being deployed in Georgia before expanding to other parts of the country throughout the year. The e-Transits have 3 times the cargo capacity of the Grumman LLV delivery vehicles. It look like a little Jeep that the post office currently uses. Actually, they've moved to something that's more van-like, but these are a little bit larger, these e-Transits are. The Postal Service plans to have a fleet with more than 66,000 EVs, with at least 45,000 of them be on the road by 2028. And the Siemens is making the charging stations, and they'll be able to charge EVs overnight, so they'll be ready for the next day's deliveries. And they're planning on rolling out approximately 14,000 chargers across the U.S. at Postal Service locations. And they're being supplied by Siemens, Rexel, ChargePoint, and Blink. Eventually, about 75% of delivery of their vehicles are expected to be electric. Our next topic is NASCAR is debuting an EV, basically electric stock car, to make a demo run at the Los Angeles Coliseum, but it won't be racing anytime soon. Road and Track had shared details a while back that they were exploring electrified racing. Obviously, one of the things, if you have a 500-mile race, it's pretty hard to have a big enough battery. So EVs in this type of situation would probably have to compete against other EVs as opposed to gas cars to make it even on that transition. Now, when you're going 200 miles per hour, you're really draining that battery pretty fast. So we've talked about, you could do battery swapping. That's probably the most likely situation is when the vehicle's going into the pit stop. Somehow the crew would quickly swap out one battery, put in another. But these batteries weigh thousands of pounds. So you'd have to have a little crane set up of some sort to be able to pull one out, put the next one in. A big thing that's come up, and this is in adoption of EVs, are they affordable? And the biggest single cost in an electric vehicle is the battery. We had record low EV battery prices in 2023. They dropped down to $128 per kilowatt hours, and for cells it was down to $89 per kilowatt hour. I have seen estimation that by the end of next year, we might be down under $50 per kilowatt hour. So these vehicles typically have batteries that are 80 to 100 kilowatt hours. There's some bigger ones, like the GMC Hummer EV has a 200 kilowatt hour battery. If you're bringing that down by $50, that lowers the manufacturer's cost by $10,000. So there's going to be other savings. Tesla's doing the Gigapress. GM bought the company that makes the Gigapress. And so GM cars will have this tech as well. And this makes it cheaper to actually make the car itself, to make the chassis and make the underbody of the vehicle. So you're going to see all kinds of innovations driving down the cost of manufacturing electric vehicles. Porsche has an announcement that they're coming out with a new all-electric Macan EV, and it's going to have a CATL battery from China. CATL has a 37.4% market share. Tesla uses a lot of theirs, but they're looking at a driving range of 780 kilometers. That's about just a little shy of 500 miles. I think that's about 480 miles. Built on the 800-volt high-voltage architecture PPE electric platform, it supports both 400-volt and 800-volt charging configurations. That means it's going to be able to charge faster. Here's some stats on the Macan Electric. The base model has a 300 kilowatt combined power, 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 5.2 seconds. That's basically about the same as 0 to 62 miles per hour. Range of 784 kilometers. Once again, that's just shy of 500 miles. And it's priced at about $78,800. And the Macan Turbo Electric is going to have 470 kilowatt hours of power, 0 to 100 kilometers in 3.3 seconds, probably 0 to 60 in about 3.2, and range of 765 kilometers, also just a little bit shy of 500 miles, and $105,000 price tag. Here's something interesting coming from the insurance industry, because I talked about this a while back about how Teslas have a really high rate of accidents. Now, one of the theories there is Tesla drivers tend to be far more likely, and this is across all EVs, EV drivers tend to be male, and men drive on average about triple what women do. And so you're going to have a lot more electric car accidents. But one of the big things from insurance brokers is people forget about how much acceleration the cars have, because they're so much faster than gas cars. Because when you press the gas or the accelerator, it instantly accelerates, unlike a gas car, which has a pause while you wait for the fuel to go into the engine and then go. With the electric car, it just goes. Electric car drivers are having more accidents because they're not used to the power of acceleration, according to a top insurance broker. The value of claims made by EV drivers is typically 35% higher than it is for a gas car. So that's a pretty big number. And a lot of it has to do with if the battery is damaged, the whole battery needs to be replaced. So this is something Elon Musk had to say. He said Chinese EVs will flatten the U.S. car industry without trade barriers. In order for the U.S. Big Three to survive, it's critical that there are trade barriers against Chinese EV manufacturers coming into the United States. And currently there's a 25% premium put on Chinese cars, and so you don't really see Chinese cars being sold in the United States. one of the big things that Musk says, the Chinese car companies are the most competitive car companies in the world. I think they'll have significant success outside of China, depending on what kind of tariffs or trade barriers are established. Frankly, I think if there are not trade barriers established, they will pretty much demolish most other companies in the world. So they are extremely good. Their car quality is good. Their technology is excellent. And the vehicles are very stylish. It's just a matter of time before the Chinese companies start to dominate in the North American markets at some point. Now, if you're charging your car at home, it really doesn't matter how fast the car charges. But if you were going to be constantly charging it at charging stations, this is a big issue. So this is everybody's big criticism. Well, why should I have to wait 20 minutes or 30 minutes for a EV to charge? And there's technologies coming down the pike. Yeah, I would say in 10 years, your difference between gas and electric on filling up the battery might be down to like a couple of minutes. When I'm saying like if it takes you 5 minutes to fill up a gas car, it might take 7 minutes to fill up an EV. Now, you have different levels of chargers. A basic wall plug is a level 1. A level 2 charger is one that you have generally designed for your home or maybe your office. And then a level 3 is what people typically call a supercharger. And that's what you think of when you're on the road. Now, if you were charging at a hotel, it might just be a level 2 charger, okay? Because then you might plug in for 8 hours. But when you're plugging in at a charging station or a Tesla supercharging station, those are all level 3 chargers, which charge very fast. And so when we talk about charging a battery in 20 or 30 minutes, we're talking about a supercharger. So the EVs, the fastest charging sedan is the Lucid Air. And for its price tag, it ought to. You can get, in 12 minutes, you can add approximately 200 miles of range. So that's currently the fastest charging sedan. Now, the fastest charging SUV is the Genesis GV60. It charges 200 miles in 18 minutes. So that's a big difference between 12 minutes and 18 minutes. The fastest charging truck is the Rivian R1T, and it takes 20 minutes to add 200 miles to it. Okay, so that's a little bit longer of a stop. Now, there's lots of cars that charge slowly. Fastest charging sports car, the Audi e-tron GT, 22.5 minutes to get 270. But then the fastest charging supercar is the Rimac Navara. That'll just set you back a few $1,000,000, but it takes 19 minutes to add 200 miles to the battery on it. I can't imagine somebody going to a charging station, though, with a Rimac that you would take that on a road trip. The world's largest electric vehicle maker, which is BYD, rang in the new year by breaking ground on its first ever sodium-ion plant in China. It's a $1.4 billion project, produced 30 gigawatt hours of capacity annually. Or 1 gigawatt is how much energy 2 coal-fired power plants produce, and it could fire up 750,000 homes. Their battery arm, called FinDreams, partnered with Huhai Holding Group to break into the sodium battery market, and the pair hopes to be the top supplier worldwide. The sodium-ion batteries don't use lithium or cobalt. The batteries are most useful in low-cost, small cars or two-wheelers that don't need high energy density. And then for our last news article for today, Tesla says its next-generation vehicle will start production in the second half of 2025. And we're talking about a lower pricing point than the Tesla Model 3, enter production sometime in the second half of 2025. Redwood is the supposed code name of its next generation vehicle. The details of the vehicle are relatively slim. They've long discussed the idea of introducing maybe a robo-taxi-based vehicle to be void of human controls, but not necessarily clear if this next generation vehicle will be geared towards full autonomy. We're hoping for something, we've always heard about where they're going to introduce the Model 2. There's been talks in Germany that a less expensive Tesla is starting production that'll be around the equivalent of about US $25,000. And we'll see how that plays out. Anyways, that is the end of the weekly update. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great day.